What's up? What's happening on a Tuesday? A hot one in the district. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Had a heck of a day already. We recorded some stuff this morning. Just did a Take Command mailbag. Still got Anthony and I went to camp day at Capital One Arena. Watched the Mystics with 10,000 screaming kids. And still got the U.S. Women's National Team at Audi Field tonight. We're talking about all of it, as well as our top story today, Anthony Haney, which is that sometime in the middle of the third quarter, I think it was, that I all of a sudden looked down on my phone and I was like, oh, well then, Mike Garafolo. All righty then. Mike Garafolo, NFL Network, reporting that Brandon Aiyuk, the 49ers receiver, who is Jaden Daniels' bestie, has requested a trade officially from the 49ers. I guess that's opposed to all the unofficial requesting that he's done by all of the things that he's done, some of which involve Jaden Daniels that we've talked about, posting film clips, just generally saying, oh, they don't want me, making sure that that's captured on camera and put in HD out into the Twitterverse. But he has apparently gone to John Lynch. I guess this is how this works. He or his agent go to John Lynch and are like, we would like to be traded. And what I'd imagine is that John Lynch looked back at Aiyuk or his agent and went, okay. And they don't care. Because why would they? Brandon Aiyuk is under contract, and as long as Brandon Aiyuk shows up, then that's fine. They want to play this season and figure out what they can be as a football team. And the best version of the San Francisco 49ers this season is that Brandon Aiyuk plays out his contract and that he's on the team at the current number, $14.12 million, and then they'd figure it out in the future. Because here's the thing about where the 49ers are at, is they have some guys in the next couple of years they're going to be at the end of their contracts, and they've got to make decisions on. And one of the biggest ones is Deebo Samuel, who they went through this whole song and dance with a couple of years ago, and they stared down the barrel and said, we're not giving you anything. We're going to just have you play out. And eventually they re-signed him because they knew that Samuel was too valuable to them to let go. And you saw it last year. When he was right, they were the best team in the NFL. And when he wasn't, then they lost a bunch of games. And he got hurt, late in the season or in the playoff game, I think it was, and he wasn't quite right. But still, I mean, the Chiefs obviously were the Chiefs. But and the Ravens game was the Ravens game. But by and large, when Deebo was out there, like, they were incredible last year. And Deebo is in the final year of the final big year, I should say, of his contract. There is an out after this year where they would save a pretty decent chunk of change by moving on from him. They would save, they have 15 in dead cap, but they would save 9. So that's if they do it pre-June 1. They could spread the dead cap to a very manageable 6.6 next year and 8.4 in 26 and save $17 million on the cap next year. So it feels like that's probably what they would do if Samuel isn't awesome and or is hurt this season, which then would create a whole bunch of room to go and sign Brandon Aiyuk to a long-term deal. But they have structured their cap situation so that they can make these decisions sequentially. Giving Aiyuk the money now doesn't really help them. They don't want to have to do that. They don't really have the room to do that. And they also don't know that that's what they want to do. And this is the complicated thing. And I will say that Logan and I just had a pretty extensive conversation about this specific to the 49ers, which is probably really good for a San Francisco radio station if they want to, borrow what we just talked about on Take Command. But I'll relay it for you here as well because I think it's interesting on a football level. And it also speaks to some team building stuff that certainly Adam Peters believes in as the guy who helped set up what is going on in San Francisco right now and is now here as the general manager in D.C. But there is always a struggle to try to get the right personnel matched up with your scheme. And who you are in a particular scheme matters. And so for Aiyuk, the hard part for him is he plays in a place that values a lot of positional versatility and winning. His job is kind of to win one-on-one man coverage situations. And that's not necessarily his specialty. Now, there's a lot of stuff that they do really like about him. The physicality he plays with, 49er. The blocking that he gives, 49er. The vertical speed, the space that he creates because of that, 49er. But as a route running technician, where sometimes they're like, all right, man, it's man-to-man, and some of our other matchups are not quite as good because we're trying to do stuff. Like, we need you to just go be a big boy out there and do X wide receiver stuff. And he's not necessarily an A-plus level at that. He's maybe a B-plus. He's pretty good. But he's not Jamar Chase. He's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Tyreek Hill. And he wants to get paid like those guys. And they can't afford it. Because there's this incredible quote from Kyle Shanahan in Receiver, the series on Netflix, which I'm almost done with now. We've watched 7 of the 8 episodes. But as Deebo Samuel gets hurt, and they're talking about the value of Deebo, and Kyle just goes, it's not like we run the same plays with our backup Deebo. We don't, that's not a thing. And so all of a sudden the entire offense changes. And if you're Aiyuk, realistically, there is a backup Brandon Aiyuk. He's not as good as Brandon Aiyuk, but the whole playbook's still available. There's nothing you can't run because Brandon Aiyuk is not out there. And that is true for a lot of receivers. Even like Justin Jefferson, right? You can run all the same stuff with backup Justin Jeffersons. It takes 3 guys to replace him. It's just not nearly going to be as effective. Whereas there's like very specific stuff where Deebo Samuel can run it, and there is nobody else that it's worth running for in San Francisco's offense. And so as San Francisco ultimately makes their decision to pay Aiyuk or not, these are the kinds of things they have to factor. Is like, okay, if we want to run this offense with someone and take full advantage of our head coach's schematic genius and his ability to get the ball to playmakers in space and the run after catch and the being dangerous with the ball, we have to make sure that we allocate the proper cap and space on our roster to have the right guys. And I just wonder if they look at Brandon Aiyuk and go, we like you, but we think we can get 90% of that production from Ricky Pearsall on a rookie contract, and at that point, it's not worth us paying you. That said, if you're another team and you don't have all of that stuff, that's not how your offense runs, and some of the vertical speed and things that Brandon Aiyuk brings, the physicality that he plays with, could be valuable to you, you might be willing to pay him $30 million a year. It's not to say he's not worth it. And that's where it gets tricky in the NFL, is it's got to be the right fit of player and scheme and value. And that player has to be worth what you're paying him to you. And just because you draft a guy and he's worth it on the rookie contract doesn't necessarily mean that he is going to be worth it on a top-of-the-market deal for you. And so this, of course, begs a question, is if John Lynch says, hey, let me call Adam here, my old pal, my former lieutenant, and he's like, hey, Adam, would you want to trade for Brandon Aiyuk? Would you want to do that? Would you want to give up some amount of draft capital for Aiyuk? And would you want to pay him? 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980 is our phone number for you to answer that question. Brandon Aiyuk has officially requested a trade from the 49ers. Should the Commanders be interested? Your calls next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls at 301-230-0980 on Brandon Aiyuk officially requesting a trade from the 49ers. Are you interested for the Commanders or your team? If you're not a Commanders fan, but you're checking in on a big sports news day, who's your team and do you want Brandon Aiyuk? 301-230-0980. We will get to the calls in just a moment. I did find this pretty funny on the YouTube chat. Locked On Law says, and I have requested a date with Emma Stone. Neither of us will be getting our requests granted. I do not think that ultimately you will see Aiyuk traded unless someone gives up a gigantic haul. But I've seen wackier stuff happen in the NFL. I do think John Lynch has shown the fortitude in the past with Deebo Samuel and others. They did it last year with someone else, where they just were like, we'll, if we can come with a number, we'll come with a number. If not, you're under contract. You're going to play. Like, if you want to sit out, sit out. If you know what NFL dudes don't do, sit out. Because, like, Brandon Aiyuk is going to make 8 figures this year. He's not passing up 8 figures. But 301-230-0980 is the phone number. Let's go to Rod. Rod, are you interested for the Commanders in Brandon Aiyuk?
Hey, what's up, man? Yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, I mean, this team, our team don't have a lot of weapons. I you know how I view our situation, man. You ever play spades, and as you playing spades, you may ask your partner. You'll ask them. You'll say, man, how many books you got? And they may say, man, well, I got 1 in the possible or 2 in the possible. When I look at our team, I look at McLaren as a book, and the rest of those guys are just possibles. If you add Brandon Aiyuk, you got 2 books, and then you got the rest are possibles. Right now, we just don't have enough firepower on this team. Terry McLaurin is really the only offensive weapon that I see. Dotson and the rest of those guys, man, they just possibles. I would add him. You talking about a guy that he done been to a Super Bowl. He done been deep in the playoffs many times. He's 25 years old. He got speed, toughness. Man, look, you pairing with Terry McLaurin, and then with a guy he's been playing football with, in college, and they work out in the off season with our quarterback. Man, I don't see why you wouldn't try to add a guy like him to this thing.
I think it's a compelling case, Rod. Thanks for the call. I think that Aiyuk is obviously tremendous. I think the question you come down to, and we'll take some more calls on this, in 301-230-0980, at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The question you have to ask is resource management, right? Is, okay, Jahan's a possible. What if he hits? Okay, well, then are we gonna want to pay him? Okay, we have to consider that. Eventually, you're going to have to pay Luke McCaffrey, but that you just drafted him, so that's 4 years down the line. Don't got to worry about that for right now. Terry, you're going to have to repay him or let him go, and that's another question, right? Like, do you envision Terry being around for the long term, or is this a guy that you see as really important for you right now because he's your captain and you want to do right by him, but, like, actually after this year, like, we can move on from Terry, maybe we do that. Like, these are the questions you're trying to ask as a front office and evaluating this and your timelines and the whole deal. Also, how values your draft capital. Like, your cap is one thing, but your draft capital that you actually need to acquire him is another. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Scott. Scott, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. What do you think about Brandon Aiyuk for the Commanders?
Hey, Craig, what's happening, man? I would love to have him. However, all those points you just made is why I'm going to say for the first time in a long time, I'm leaving that decision, and I'm happy with the people that are going to make that decision. So I think we're probably in better position than any other team because Adam Peters probably knows what that guy is on and off the field more than anybody else would. So, whatever they choose to do, I'm with it.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate the call. I am too, which is a part of this. Like, one, I don't think that I feel super strongly either way about making a trade or not. Like, I can see the arguments for, I see the arguments against, and I ultimately know that when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk specifically, there is nobody that knows him better than Adam Peters. Scouted him. They're great friends. When he was talking about drafting Jaden, they definitely spoke. And obviously Aiyuk. Not like Aiyuk was like, you have to draft him. And Adam Peters was like, okay, whatever you say, Brandon. That's not how that goes. But we obviously know that the whatever questions Adam asked, he liked the answers enough that he ultimately did pull the trigger. For whatever it's worth, Brandon Aiyuk last year for PFF was the second highest graded receiver in football, which feels nuts. It's not to say he's the second best, but he did grade out as the second best receiver in football, according to PFF last year. He's been a green or, in last year's case, blue grade every single year. Last year, he graded out a 91.5. Tyreek Hill was the only receiver in the NFL that graded out better. Nuts. He graded out as a 91.7 as a receiver, 72.9 as a run blocker. Just elite level stuff. We know he's really good. The question is, do you want to? Is he good enough at the things that you want a receiver to be great at to grade out as a $30+ million player? And that's the thing that I just don't know with Aiyuk is like, is the value to spend that money there at that position on that guy? Because it's one thing if it's Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson, even Amon-Ra St. Brown at this point, like 1,500-yard guy last year, total game changer week in, week out. Versus Aiyuk, who's excellent, but is Aiyuk lining up demanding double coverage every single snap? Like, that's the question I have when you're talking about paying a dude that much money. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Robert in Kensington. Robert, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Yes, and thank you for taking my call. I think Aiyuk sounds very enticing, but my mind goes back to when was the last time that the Redskins were relevant in the way that we now say we want them to be, and competitive in the way that we now say we want them to be, and that was when they had players who stuck with a team, like Art Monk, like all the different linemen they had, and the roster continuity that they had under Joe Gibbs. And if Aiyuk coming in is going to send Terry McLaurin somewhere else or otherwise upset the hierarchy in the team roster, then I'd say no.
Robert, I'm not going to lie. That is one of the silliest reasons I've ever heard to do a move or not. You're referencing an era that was pre-salary cap. Different league. Also, they've already flipped almost 30 players. Like, they're the guys that, with all due respect to Terry, who I think could be on a championship team in a heartbeat and a key part of a championship team. And John Allen, same thing. Jaron Payne. The guys they kept are really good football players. You don't get to be a part of a 4-win team and be like, we can't upset the apple cart. Ah! They already flipped it over. The apples are everywhere. We're not continuity. Like, yes, the reason they kept all those dudes back in the day, Art Monk was a Hall of Famer, etc., is because they were great. Getting great players is more important than continuity for the sake of continuity. You want continuity with great players. So if Brandon Aiyuk is better than what you have, you should be interested in Brandon Aiyuk no matter what happens to the rest of the... If De'Ami Brown has to go so Brandon Aiyuk can stay, then you send out De'Ami Brown and you don't care that he's been here for a couple years. All due respect to De'Ami. Brandon Ayuk's a better football player. Here's where I think it comes down to the actual crux of it, which is you have to make a decision what he's worth to you. I opened the hour talking about how if I'm San Francisco, I don't know that I want to pay Aiyuk. Not because he's not really good or maybe even great. And the beauty of it is they can wait. They can go midway through the season and be like, we're going to give you an extension now because you're killing it. We can get to the offseason. We can franchise tag you. Like, San Francisco's got control. They've got options, right? But ultimately, they might decide, Ricky Pearsall, this kid we drafted out of Florida, is really good, and we think he can do what we need our wide receiver one to do while allowing us to pay Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk, these versatile chess pieces that are super unique to us in San Francisco and that make our offense go. You have to decide for Washington, who you want to be offensively. Is Aiyuk a piece that you think could enhance what you have? What does the relationship that he has with Jaden Daniels mean to you from a dollar value standpoint? And ultimately, can you afford to pay Terry top dollar and Aiyuk top dollar because Jaden's on a rookie contract? They have so much cap flexibility, but what you don't want to do is lock yourself into anything at the moment when you're flexible, because you want to be able to pounce on other teams that get in binds and have players that you might want that they can't afford to re-sign. And I think the last piece here is with the wide receiver position being what it is in modern football, with 7-on-7 dominating the youth levels and just loads of incredible receivers coming out year over year. Unless you get a dude that is Jefferson, is Hill, is Chase, is like a true top 5, these guys, despite the fact that good receivers grow on trees, don't grow on trees, is great. I don't know that I'm looking to pay a receiver a ton of money, because the production uptick you get is not worth the dollar for dollar value you could get by upgrading 3 other positions with that $30 million plus a year. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, it is a continuation, day 2 of our top 10 most important commanders of the 2024 season. We'll reveal number 9 next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And 1 hour from right now, we preview tonight's game at Audi Field. The U.S. Women's National Team in town for their final send-off game ahead of the Paris Olympics. And we're going to do it with a World Cup champion. Sam Mewis joins us, now retired, working for Men in Blazers, the head of the women's game. Their coverage, their women's football vertical, their women's soccer vertical over there at Men in Blazers. We've had Raj from Men in Blazers on before, and it was an absolute delight talking to Sam this morning. So we'll air that for you coming up 1 hour from right now. Not only talking about the game tonight, but how the U.S. stacks up heading into the Paris Olympics. 6 o'clock tonight, we debut our brand new segment, this version, the pre-training camp version of Pick 6, where we ask 6 key questions about every single Commander's position group. It's our positional group previews now through the start of training camp next week. We will do the D-line today, but right now we're doing this every single day at 4:30. It is time to reveal the next in our list of most important Commanders for the 2024-2025 season. Yesterday at number 10, we had defensive lineman Dorrance Armstrong. And today, it is time for
number 9.
And number 9 is none other than Emmanuel Forbes. Emmanuel Forbes is an interesting one to talk about, Anthony. And I think number 9 and number 8, we'll get to tomorrow, fall in similar boats for similar reasons, even though they're very different players. But the reason these players are on the back end of this list is because if they hit, they could totally elevate and change the entire outcome of this season. If all of a sudden in this defense, Emmanuel Forbes is the ball hawk that we anticipated him being last year, that based off his college production, Emmanuel Forbes is like, wow, lockdown corner, pick 6 machine, interceptions all over the field. That changes both the short and long-term outcome for this team, because all of a sudden you're not necessarily looking as heavily at corner early in the draft next year. You're like, wow, we have a guy on a rookie deal that's a great value at a position that costs a lot of money for top dollar guys. So that would be good. You also look at these DBs and you're like, we like a lot of them, but where did the turnovers come from? Who's going to be the Deron Bland? Who's going to be the Trayvon Diggs? And obviously Emmanuel Forbes would be the best guy. If he busts this year, you know that you probably move on from him and you just like cut bait and it's not going to work here and you move on. And if someone else wants to pick him up, great. But he's just not Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr.'s kind of corner. But the reason it's not higher up on the list in terms of like a boom or bust type of situation, why he's still only number 9, is because there is a version of this season that plays out with Emmanuel Forbes not playing well, but the Commanders being just fine. Because what if, and in reality, if we're being totally honest and transparent, which what's the point of not being? These lists are not some kind of mad science experiment or secretive. Like the whole point is to have a discussion to enlighten ourselves about this team and get to thinking about this team, 10 days out from training camp, or at this point, 8 days out from training camp, is you could very easily put Benjamin St-Juste in the same category. We could have just as easily swapped BSJ and Forbes here. The reason I choose Forbes over BSJ is because contractually it's better for Forbes to be the guy in the long term. He changes the game for them more in the long term because BSJ is getting towards the end, if not, this is the final year, I believe, of his rookie deal. So if BSJ goes out and balls out and all of a sudden learns how to intercept balls and some of the stuff that he's struggled with, penalties, etc., he just fits this system and he's a freaking baller this year, well, that's going to all of a sudden cost you some amount of money. I don't think BSJ can go out and have 1 year and demand top dollar, even if he goes and breaks the NFL interception record. I don't think he's going to all of a sudden be the highest paid corner in the league next year. You just haven't done it long enough. But if Forbes goes out and does that, well, now we got a bargain. Now we're partying. Because our first round pick, even if it was made by someone else, that contract is still 4 or 5 years, and you got 2 to 3 more cheap years left on it after year 2. But realistically, let's say Forbes busts. let's say Forbes, it doesn't work. He's not physical enough. He can't play the run the way they want. The ball skills just aren't enough to overcome him getting beat on a regular basis. He's getting bodied, the whole deal. Well, there's a chance that BSJ is your number 1 corner. Michael Davis is your number 2 corner. And Forbes doesn't even play that much. And they've got guys like Sainwer still in the slot. Like, how many outside corners do you need? If you stay healthy, only 2. Now, obviously, depth becomes an issue. And I think the thing with Forbes that's kind of a struggle is he doesn't have a lot of special teams value. So if all of a sudden he's not, obviously we'll see, maybe he returns kicks because they want to get the ball in his hands. Maybe he returns punts because they want to get the ball in his hands. But if he's not doing that, he's not covering kicks. He's not big enough. He's not one of your best tacklers. Doesn't matter if he can run. Okay, cool. He ran down on punt coverage. And then, 1, he'd have trouble probably getting off a jam. And 2, and then what? Trying to tackle big, thick returner types? Like, no, it's not his highest and best use. And it's not, you have better options. Guys like Christian Holmes, who, like, as a cover corner, has got questions. But as a punt coverer, hey, Christian, run really fast and go tackle that dude. Got it, coach. Pew. Splat. Like, that's what he does. Terry Castro Fields. Like, they've got guys down the corner depth chart who fit those special teams molds. So, long story short, the reason Forbes comes in at number 9 is if he hits, he changes the entire complexity of this defense. If all of a sudden he's a turnover machine, they are an optimized version of what they want to be. Dan does it again. He comes in just like he did in Dallas, takes over a mediocre to bad defense and flips it in year 1. Joe Witt Jr. obviously has the biggest role to play in that is the defensive coordinator. Quinn would get a lot of credit, as he should, because he's going to play a big part and he's the head coach. But let's not forget Joe here. Bang, bang, bang. Plus Joe Witt Jr. Like, hey, you're the greatest DB coach that's ever lived. Congratulations. You got a guy who was absolutely lost last year at certain points and was having a lot of trouble with technique, and you got him doing what he's supposed to do, and now he's producing at a first-round level. If he doesn't, they could be in trouble, or they could not. And because there's kind of that wiggle room there is an outcome where it's not as high stakes as some of the guys we're going to talk about later, where if they're bad, the Commanders are screwed. That's why Emmanuel Forbes ultimately comes in at number 9. Anthony, anything you would like to add, sir, to the Emmanuel Forbes discussion before we open it up to the phones and ask everyone's expectations for Forbes coming up at 4:45 on the phones?
Not anything I would want to add. Probably just double down on, what you said about him, potentially reaching this potential. He was drafted to, take the ball away, score points. And I think on any team, if you're creating turnovers and, turning those turnovers into points, I think you have a place on the field. And I feel as though, we see players do that. Trayvon Diggs, like, I want to say his second or third season, like, he was getting interceptions, returning them, but he was also getting destroyed. And then he was
the year that he had his massive interception year. He was super boomer bust. He
exactly.
I think he also gave up more 20-plus yard touchdowns than any player in the league that year.
Exactly. But I think, the years after that, not the one where he got injured, he, was still playing. He ended up playing better. And I think that's really what I want to see. So say, Forbes does go out there and, start intercepting the ball, but it's still, getting abused a little bit. I just think it's a slow work in progress. And I think he'll just continue to develop as we've seen other players do.
For sure. I think the thing, like the floor under Forbes this year is his run defense. Can you play with the proper amount of physicality in the run that you can't be played off the field? And that was part of the problem last year. Like, he didn't have a willingness nor the technique to tackle and take on blocks and, like, fight. And it's not, like, when I say that, I want to be really clear that I'm not inherently questioning Forbes' toughness mentally or physically. But there is a level of strain and a level of effort that when you play in college, you don't need to play with to be excellent. And in the NFL, especially at his size, it's a requirement. And so that is something that I as much put on the coaches last year as I do the player, and say, if they can get him to strain, Because even if he's not making a bunch of plays, just hold the edge and do it with enough like force and technique and again, strain that other guys can get there, right? Do you lose the corner or the edge quickly, or do you strain and draw the play out so that the linebackers can come in and do their thing? Like, these are the kinds of margins we're talking about here. And if he can just be playable, sounds like, basketball sometimes. Can the guy just be playable on defense that his shooting matters? Like, then the pass game stuff I do think will come along, because I just think he's too skilled and too talented and produced at too high a level and too good of a conference in the SEC to think that he's going to be a total bust in that category. But if he gets played off the field, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he might get a pick 6 or 2 every single year if he is a sitting duck otherwise. So that is why Emmanuel Forbes is number 9. Number 8 tomorrow at 4:30. Your calls with your expectations for Emmanuel Forbes this season next. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. Programming note, we're going to switch some stuff around. Sam Mewis is going to join us at 5 p.m. And then on the Brandon Aiyuk story, our pal Bonte Hill from 95.7 The Game in the Bay is going to join us at 5:30. So moving some stuff around, but everybody still gets theirs in. Sam Mewis on the U.S. Women's National Team tonight at Audi Field and where they are headed. Now the team is coming together ahead of the Olympic Games. That coming up at 5 o'clock. And then Bonte Hill on the Brandon Aiyuk trade request coming up at 5:30. Right now, though, continuing our top 10 most important commanders of 2024 countdown. Yesterday, Dorrance Armstrong, number 10. Today, number 9 is Emmanuel Forbes. And the second part of what we're going to do before or after we give our analysis is ask you, what are your expectations for that player going into the season? 301-230-0980. Let's get things started with the Junkyard Dog, JYD. What are your expectations for Emmanuel Forbes in 2024?
Well, he disappointed me last year because I thought I was going to perhaps see a little bit of the second coming of Darryl Green. I'm hoping to see this year that because he's got a whole new coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball, that they'll somehow be able to tear him down and build him back up somewhere where we'll see a different type of corner.
Yeah.
I think we definitely need to see that just from him because I heard you mention Michael Davis, and I'm sorry. The Michael Davis that I looked at last year that I saw play for the Chargers was not it. Now maybe things can change when you go to a new venue. Maybe so, different coaching, maybe so. But I wouldn't put any hope in this guy and Davis.
Yeah,
when you
go ahead, JYD.
Just to make a quick, I know I didn't get in on that, but they need Aiyuk simply because when you look at the receivers that are in our division, everybody has a good receivers except for we only. I just don't think that the kid from that everybody that we got is good enough. Dotson's not good enough, and I think if we can get Aiyuk, then it'll be something different. Because you look at the Giants, they got Neighbors. You look at the Cowboys, they got Lamb. You got the Eagles with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. When you looked at Jaden Daniels last year. He was in college. He was throwing to thoroughbreds, and we don't have that here.
No, that's true, and this is part of the question. JYD, thanks for the call. When it comes to Aiyuk, and he's really good, but is he great? And if he's not great, is he worth paying a bunch of money and giving up draft capital for? Because you have to do both. Like the Niners aren't going to trade him for a fourth rounder. So let's say you're giving up a third or a second. Okay, well, that's a potential starter. And you're paying him $30+ million. Like, that's multiple starters at other positions potentially that are really good players. And if you're great, if you're that bleeping dude, then, yeah, you don't blink twice and you don't think about it. Justin Jefferson, the Vikings are not going to regret $1 that they spent on Justin Jefferson because he's going to produce at such an obscene level over anybody else they could get that he's worth that. Fingers crossed on health and everything else. But that's the nature of this game, and these decisions have to be made is how much is it worth for production per dollar? Because every dollar you spend that's suboptimal on the production at position X is taking from dollars that could be spent at position Y, which brings us back to Forbes. Corner and Davis, by the way. I think corner. Here's a hot take for you, Anthony. You ready?
I'm ready.
I think corner is the most coaching-dependent position in the sport. Think about some of the wild swings in play we've seen from guys over the years. Is there anything else like what happened to Nnamdi Asomugha? Nnamdi Asomugha in Oakland was the best corner that we'd like ever seen in the history of the planet. It was like that dude didn't have a completion on him for like 2 years. It was crazy how good he was. I would love to go back and have PFF in the Nnamdi Asomugha peak days. His grade would have been like a 98. Like Trent Williams playing offensive line, but at corner. And then he went to Philly and he stunk. Like, not just wasn't Nnamdi Asomugha, he was bad. He was out of the league in like 2 years. That's how fast it can change at corner. And we've seen, like, was Trayvon Diggs that good? Nah, no one expected him to be that good. Bang. Awesome. Think of how many Hall of Fame type players, or at least Hall of Fame type stretches we've had from late round picks. Josh Norman's the entire argument about what I just said. Josh Norman, late round pick, looks like he's going to the Hall of Fame, leaves Carolina, different scheme here, more like solid but nothing special player. Not worth being paid the highest paid corner in the league. Was good, but like it wasn't any more than good. He was average. Diggs, Deron Bland in Dallas. Like those guys get coached up by Joe Witt Jr. and Dan Quinn. They're just absolute killers. Those guys, we'll see this year what they are under Mike Zimmer, who's, by the way, a good DC. But it's all so much scheme, skill set dependent. Last year, like James Bradbury and Darius Slay, awesome 2 years ago, lead them to the Super Bowl in Philly. Last year, not very good. This year with Vic Fangio, I think a lot of people expect Darius Slay to be good again. I think corner's the most coaching-dependent position in sports, or not in sports, in the sport, which is why I am pretty fascinated to see what Forbes and company and Davis and St. Juice, all three of them, all have tremendous traits in certain areas, what they can do under Witt and DQ.
I would agree with you, Craig.
I'm trying to think. I'm like trying to challenge myself. Quarterback seems like the obvious one, but like at quarterback, is there a scheme where Peyton Manning's not awesome? Like, no. Because at the end of the day, like the decision making, the accuracy, like all that stuff parlays.
That matters.
Receiver, I guess. But I kind of think like no matter where you put Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, like those dudes would get open and the ball would go to them and they'd score. Now, it might be the difference, like Minnesota JJ with Kevin O'Connell calling the plays is an 1,800-yard receiver or something ridiculous. He had 1,000 last year and he missed like 8 games. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Is he going to be that everywhere? No, but he'd still be awesome.
I mean, I think to your point, I just think cornerback in general is outside of the quarterback, is the toughest position to play on, the field. And the fact that, we see the receivers getting better and better, like that position becoming a premium. Since they're getting paid so much, now we got to find guys that's going to check these guys. So I think it sort of kind of goes hand in hand.
For sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see if the kid bounces back. But I'm really looking forward to, whether or not he gets his confidence back. Because I think that was sort of kind of what was taken from him last year after getting beat so many times and all the receivers that he was also going up against.
I think they need to let him be him.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Dan Quinn's about from a personality standpoint. I mean, Ron in the press last year whining about BSJ and Forbes doing the lockdown celebration was one of the lamest coaching things I've ever heard in my life. If you want it to stop, then make it stop. But also, why? Just like let them have. It's a personality-driven position. Like you need to be a bit of a nut to play corner because you have to have an irrational confidence. It's part of the position. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's a great point from you that like getting Forbes back confident is big. And Joe Witt Jr. seems like the kind of guy who can certainly instill confidence especially if he believes in you. All right, when we get back, we are very confident that Sam Mewis is going to give you an unbelievable breakdown of what is going to happen for U.S. soccer. Of course, the 2019 World Cup champion joins us to talk about her transition into the media and then what she's seeing with her very critical eye of many of her former teammates as they prepare for the Paris Olympics, including their final send-off game tonight at Audi Field against Costa Rica. That's next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Then Bonte Hill joins us at 5:30 to talk about the Brandon Aiyuk trade request. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And of course, we stream on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And for all of our women's sports coverage at Hoffman W Sports, which is relevant now as we welcome in a World Cup champion. I think that's the first time I've been able to say that on this show. Sam Mewis, who now is with the women's game at Men in Blazers. Sam, thanks so much for your time today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure. And so tonight at kickoff, this is going to be like 100-degree day. It's nice and swampy here in DC.
Oh.
We say it's the swamp, and we're not just talking about the politics. What's the hottest game you ever remember playing in?
Oh my gosh, I think the NWSL. We used to have this deal with Lifetime where the games were on TV at 3:30 in the afternoon, and whenever you'd have to play in like Houston or Orlando, it was like borderline like not safe. Like I just feel like my memories of playing in Houston and just the game ending and being fully drenched. So it's so hard to play in the heat. Honestly, it makes you feel so lethargic. And so I really feel for the players tonight who have to deal with this. So I'm hoping they get lots of water breaks and use all of the cooling tactics that science has figured out.
Yes, the mandatory water breaks will definitely be in effect tonight at Audi Field. And we'll obviously spend most of our time talking about the game tonight. I did have one kind of like bigger picture question for you specifically as you've gotten into the dark side, the media here. And it's something that's specific to this sport I have struggled with and talking about the Spirit in particular. So you don't know this, but I used to work for the Spirit. So I had a stint when I was inside the club and like made a bunch of great friends, and that has made it, even as someone who has been in the media for 15 years at this point, like it's hard sometimes to talk about people that are my friends. Is like I've got to do my job, but they're also my friends. You obviously have such a like your experience as a player and your friendships are much closer than anything I've dealt with, which is why I think this question is actually more interesting. How have you balanced that since you've been in the media? And like I'm going to ask you about Rose Lavelle, let's say, who's one of your best friends. How have you tried to balance those things as you've embarked on this journey with Men in Blazers?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been like a consideration. I mean, obviously I'm biased. Like, I think naturally, I just think that my friends are so talented and so good and like all belong on the field. And luckily they are. Like, I think fortunately it's been like pretty easy to be like, specifically when I'm talking about people I really care about, like to really advocate for them because I just have so much respect for them. I know how much they put into it that it is the truth and it is really how I feel. It's honest and authentic. But I think particularly like at the World Cup last summer when the team kind of struggled and then had this early exit, it was really hard to grapple with that as a fan, but also as a kind of active former player, somebody who had really good relationships with them. My sister was on the team. I wish well for all of these players so passionately. Like I want them to win. First and foremost, I'm a fan and then I'm kind of commenting. So I think I try to be as authentic as I can. And luckily I have so much love for them that I always see the good, but there is certainly this fine line that you have to walk when you are presenting the information where you have to make sure that you're balanced in what you're saying and telling the truth. If the team doesn't perform well, I have to find a way to say that. So it's definitely been a journey. I think over the past year since covering the World Cup last summer, I've learned a lot. And I just think like, luckily they're so talented that sometimes it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, it's like, hey, Rose Lavelle, good at soccer. Okay, cool, got it. You know, your sister, excellent at soccer. All right, cool, we got it. No, I think that comes through in the way you do it. And I think that's the best way that I've found to do it is like, there's a way to both be honest, but be humane, which is how we should be about people that we don't know as well, is there's like a humanity to it all that I think is important in commentary. And I think that balance is super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Men in Blazers platform as a whole is one that is really trying to spread love. Like, I know that that's not a slogan that many media companies are probably using, but we talk about empathy and compassion. And like, I think that soccer in America is exploding, obviously, but has so much room for growth. And to be able to do it at a company that genuinely wants it to grow in the best way and wants to talk about these people as people and for all of the good that they are and all of the good that they're doing. I think that's one of the reasons why I have found myself here at this company, is because we want to do it in this like joyous and like loving way. So I think that's been really helpful. And it is true to me as well, like who I want to be as a member of this like space.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And clearly, everyone saw that coming out of Roger's cold English heart, as he would try to tell you. But we all know that's not actually who Raj is. Sam Mewis is with us, of course, World Cup champion in 2019, now with Men in Blazers, running all of their women's content for the women's game. So these Olympic tune-up games, I think, are so interesting. Like, you want to obviously try stuff. You want to challenge yourself as a team. When you think back to leading up, well, 2020 was, for the Olympics for you guys was so weird because of COVID. But the game, into the major tournaments that you played in, what were you ultimately trying to get out of the tune-up games that's maybe different than the approach you take once you're in the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these tune-up games like definitely serve a purpose. The opponent is not an opponent that's going to be at the Olympics, and you going into it, I think you want to feel good in the game. You want to execute things well. You want to score a lot of goals. You want to build your confidence and build your chemistry with your teammates. It really is the last kind of game opportunity you have before these games are like do or die. So I think it's like a little bit strategic in the sense that you're really, really building and you just want to come out of it feeling good. So a lot of positive energy. The result does matter because I think that's kind of where you start that building of that confidence. And so I think games like the one against Mexico was really challenging in a lot of ways. Mexico beat us earlier this year. Like we've talked about, the game was already really hot. It's going to be even hotter tonight against Costa Rica. But I think it's like a trial run. It's like a rehearsal. You definitely want to, I keep saying this, feel good coming out of it because it's really your last run through before the major tournament where the games are just like you're walking a tightrope on those games.
How much does that change with a new manager that's now been in charge? This would be her fourth game. And obviously, I want to talk about your chat that you guys had. Sam hosted a great kind of send-off event with Emma Hayes and some of the players that we've already talked about that's in the Men in Blazers feed if people want to check it out. So I want to talk about that chat in a second. But when you think about it from the players' side, coming out of it with a manager and kind of a holistic view of this is all new to everybody, how does that kind of, we want to feel good coming out of it, the importance of that change, and maybe more descriptively, like what does feeling good coming out of it, what boxes will have been checked if that's the case?
Yeah. I think like you said, it's super interesting that Emma's only been with this team. Today will be her fourth game. I think to me, when I imagine that they are implementing a lot of new stuff, and it is late in the game to be implementing a lot of new stuff. I'm sure that like the language is a little bit different and the terms that get used and those final details. I mean, when you look at this team, all 22 of the players going to France are incredible players, incredible athletes. They're smart. They can adjust to different tactics. They've been through a million iterations of philosophy and playing style and coaching style. But bringing that all together in a short amount of time is a huge challenge. And so I imagine that everybody's brains are on overdrive, including Emma's. I mean, I was talking about this in Emma's first camp. Like, she had to learn everybody's name. Like, there's a whole new staff. Obviously she knows the players' names because of course they're all very well known, but you're just kind of on this like overdrive mentally. And so I think when you think about what are you really trying to get out of these send-off games, I think from the Mexico game to today, I think we all want to see a little bit more clinical finishing and in that very last piece. There's some stat we only had maybe like 6 shots on target out of 20, or those stats are wrong, but more shots on target.
The percentage wasn't good.
Yeah, it was lower than we'd like, and I see a lot of good in creating that many chances, like against especially a team like Mexico that gave us so much trouble earlier in the year. We could have won 4-0 if we had finished those chances. Mexico had some chances too, so I won't take that away from them. But a growth metric from Saturday to tonight would be capitalizing on a higher percentage of chances. And then you're right. I kept talking about you want to feel good coming out of the game. I think you just want, it's almost this intangible connection with the players around you. If you're rotating from outside back and you're getting high, is the back line shifting over to cover for you in transition? If you're Lindsey Horan and you're playing kind of a 6-8 and you get forward, are you connected with Rose Lavelle? Are you connected with Sam Coffey? Are you combining with your forwards to kind of make that happen? When the ball is wide, are there runners getting in the box? We should have 3 runners in there anytime the ball is about to get crossed. So there are definitely tangible metrics, and I think the players will get a feeling. And reading some of the comments that the players and even Emma had after the game, they have the right attitude. Like, they know that the finishing wasn't there, but they are optimistic about the chemistry and the combinations that are happening. So we still have 9 days until the first game. We have a game, then the team's going to travel to France. So there is time to, it's really just that last 1% of details. And I have full confidence that this game will help us get there.
Sam Mewis with us here on the Hoffman Show tonight. Sam, part of the Men in Blazers altcast of this game on True TV. The game is on TNT and Max if you want to watch it and you're not going to Audi Field. So you mentioned Lindsay. I'm going to put your, we talked about that ability to talk about your friends. I'm going to put it to the test here because I think one of the big questions for this team tactically / personnel wise is the combo of Lindsay and Rose. They're both so great individually. They're attacking minded. And I think there's been some questions of some people that I respect in the space who write about and cover this team about, is there maybe another midfield combination that would be better, has more defensive prowess, covers some space differently, things like that, because those two attack similar areas on the field, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about that pairing for those two, Lindsay and kind of that sometimes 6'8", sometimes she winds up playing kind of a 10 space. Rose, obviously one of the best 10s in the world. How do those two play well together? And then what needs to happen if they're going to be on the field together around them to make sure that is optimized and doesn't leave potential weaknesses?
Yeah, you referenced earlier my conversation with Emma Hayes that happened last week in New York City. I think one of the things that actually really excites me about this midfield is the opportunity for a variability in the attack. I think I have 100% faith in Lindsay Horan during a world tournament. Lindsay is experienced. She's versatile. She, I think, has a defensive presence and has a calming presence on the ball. And so I think that her playing that kind of 6'8" role with that opportunity to get her higher. Lindsay can play a double 6. She can play a double 10. She can play an 8. She can drop out wide for an outside back and cover ground there and distribute. Her vision is really second to none. I think that Lindsay is such a great distributor of the ball and she brings this composure. So when I was talking to Emma was kind of rattling off all of these kind of tactical adjustments that can be made on the field during the game. And some of them I just mentioned. And I think that Lindsay is the right player to execute all of those different looks. And then also, it's no secret, I think Rose belongs on the field every minute that she's available to be. I just think her ability to receive the ball and play forward quickly, whether that's through dribbling or passing, adds the connection from our defensive third of the team to our offensive third of the team. And anytime Rose gets the ball, everybody just kind of holds their breath in anticipation because it's like magic when she's on there. Her distribution, her dribbling, her ability to set herself up to finish. I mean, Rose is such a well-rounded player. She's also one of the most defensively aggressive and instinctive attacking players that I've seen. So the midfield actually gives me a lot of confidence. And these are two players that I fought for playing time against my entire career. So you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who has more respect for them. But I feel like that, in short, the variability and flexibility that Emma Hayes is looking for is exactly what our midfield can provide.
Defensively, then you have Sam Coffey, who seems to have taken a real hold to that number 6 spot. And then you have a variety of different players you could use along the back line, basically around Naomi Girma, and it seems like Tierna's got that other center back spot on lock right now, but obviously Nay is as good as there is in the entire world of that center back position. How confident are you in that defensive work? Because for all the frustration that we saw about scoring goals under Vlatko, they didn't give up a lot. And you know, obviously you can look at Alyssa in the very back of that, both as a shot stopper and as an organizer there. But what do you think about kind of the current state of the defensive unit and the depth at those positions, especially on an 18-player Olympic roster?
Well, I know. I mean, depth is like one of the most interesting things about this roster because it is only 16 outfield players, as again, Emma keeps alluding to. I think you're absolutely right. Naomi and Tierna in those center back positions are really, really solid. And we've seen this team playing out a lot as well. And I think I really trust them to have the decision-making power is playing out short and building possession-wise, is that on? Are we able to do that in that moment? Or do we sometimes have to play something long over the top, something diagonally? I think that both of those players are realists in the sense that we can't play short every single time. And then I think we have a lot of versatility in those outside back positions. I mean, we saw Jenna Nicewanger, Crystal Dunn can play out there, Emily Fox, Emily Sonnet. And I think that all of those players really also provide this element of Emily Sonnet could come in and play the 6. Jenna Nicewanger can get really high. Crystal Dunn, of course, is listed as a forward on the roster, so she can get high, provide crosses, be a scoring threat even from that position. So the versatility that I see from that back line is really, really dangerous offensively. I noticed against Mexico and in the past previous couple games, maybe there's a vulnerability in our transition, especially when one of those outside backs is really playing a lot higher. And so I think that's one of those last details that needs to just be fine-tuned. It's like that last 1%. How hard is the back line shifting over? Do we need a 6 to cover? But those are kind of the final steps in a team really coming together. So I have, again, full faith.
So if you look forward to the Olympics, what's the one thing that you are the most confident in with this U.S. side? And what's the one like biggest concern where you're like, if they get got, I'm scared that it's going to be like this?
Yeah, I mean, super interesting. I think I did allude to maybe we're a little bit vulnerable in transition, especially if one of our outside backs is playing really high. A little bit worried, but I definitely think we can fix it. So I'm not that worried about it. I think what I'm most confident in, and this kind of goes against what everybody's been saying about the team not being clinical with their finishing. Mal Swanson, Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith are all in great scoring form. Soph and Mal are scoring left and right in the NWSL. They can create for themselves. They can score off crosses. They can score from outside the box. Like, when you're in great scoring form like that, like, I don't think that that's just going to go away. I think it's going to click. And I think that front three is so dangerous. On top of that, we have incredible players who can come in off the bench. Jaden Shaw has been in really great form. I love to see her, similar to Mal, kind of check into the midfield and turn and then connect from there. It's almost similar to what Rose does. It's really connecting the defense to the offense. And then Lynn Williams, who's another versatile player. She just got put onto the roster. I think her defensive presence is really, really special. It's what sets her apart from everybody else. Her speed and her awareness in and around the box. She's been scoring goals in the NWSL as well. So our forwards are in great scoring form, and I think that's going to start showing tonight.
Yeah. Lynn is so funny to me, and obviously that's one of your best friends and one of your co-hosts on your shows with Men in Blazers. But like getting to condense all of Lynn down into 30 minutes, whether you are up or down, who better to possibly bring in, maybe in the entire world, than Lynn Williams as a defensive presence? Or, hey, Lynn, we need to go get a goal. Okay, bang, there goes Lynn Williams unleashed on tired legs. Like, good luck. No one can guard or cover her when she's fresh. So when she gets to go in against, wounded defenders, it just seems unfair. Last thing for you, Sam, I'd be remiss to not ask you about someone who, unfortunately, barring something terrible happening tonight, we're not going to see in Paris outside of on the sidelines. But Croy Bethune has been such a revelation this year in the league. She's going as an alternate. You went as an alternate in 2016. So I'm curious what you took from that experience and what you think Croy can take from her. Because for her, she's never actually been with the national teams before. Like, for some reason, she kept getting passed over. Part of it was she was hurt for some of the times where perhaps she would have been. But what do you think she ultimately takes from this experience, in the middle of her outstanding rookie season?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back on my experience as an alternate in 2016, I think it's really what set me up to be able to handle the ups and downs of being on the national team. It was certainly a humbling experience. I mean, you go to the tournament and your training and your performance isn't really what matters. You have to kind of remove yourself from how you usually are at a national team camp. And that's, I have to perform the very best I can. I have to ask for feedback. I have to make sure, you know what I mean? It's not that she's not trying to perform. It's that it's not about the alternates. It's about preparing the 18. So I remember in Brazil in 2016, pretending to be a center back for one of our opponents and intentionally playing this pass over and over that we had scouted that they would play, knowing it was going to get intercepted. And you have to remove your ego to be able to prepare the other team in the way that they need. And so when I think about a young player, I guess especially like Croy Bethune, who is having a way better season than I was having in 2016, it's a challenge, but it's something that teaches you this layer of selflessness and team first that you'll carry with you throughout the rest of your career. And now somebody like Croy or any of the alternates, when they are at the Olympics next time or they're at the World Cup in 2027, they'll see the players that are sitting on the bench and they'll be able to connect with them and say, hey, I was in your shoes. This is what I did. I know it's hard. And you need those players to have a good attitude, to challenge the starters in training. So it was a really, really valuable experience for me. And I think it builds a player into a well-rounded teammate and somebody who understands what it's like for every player on the roster. So I think it's a difficult experience, but like a really meaningful one too.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm glad that she got her first cap. I was kind of hoping she'd get it in DC, but we'll see if she or Hal Hirschfeld. Hal still, I don't think, has hers yet, so we could see Hal Hirschfeld tonight. Of course, who's also having a ridiculous Rookie of the Year caliber campaign here in DC if Croy wasn't having an MVP caliber campaign ahead of her. Sam Mewis, tonight, True TV, the Altcast for Men in Blazers, and check out all of Sam's work with the women's game, the podcast, the digital stuff they do on YouTube. It's all fantastic. Sam, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Of course, that Odyssey app, you can listen to all of our stations across the entire U.S., anywhere in the U.S., from New York to San Fran, L.A., all our stations everywhere, music, sports, whatever. That includes our sister station, 95.7 The Game, out in San Francisco, where they have a lovely morning show. And one of the hosts is a guy named Bonte Hill, who we keep having to call because things keep happening out in the Bay Area that are nuts and potentially have Washington implications. That version of that today is that Brandon Aiyuk has officially requested a trade from the 49ers, that according to Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network, and thus we bring Bonte back to the show. I told you we weren't going to get through the entire summer without talking.
I know. It's just wild. And you know what? I was just talking to a producer, and if I was doing my regular show this week at 95.7 Game, we switched up the lineups. So the afternoon show's doing the mornings. Shasky and I are doing afternoons, and the afternoon guys are doing late afternoons. And so the news broke 5 minutes into our show where we had all this Joe Lacob stuff as he sat down with David Aldridge from The Athletic and obviously TNT and NBA TV. And so we're thinking, oh, man, we're going to talk about Warriors, what's going on with Podziemski and Kuminga, Lowry Markkinen, and the Aiyuk news hits. And look, let's be real. It's a negotiation ploy by Aiyuk. It's his last stand with the 49ers, but I absolutely understand his position. The guy needs to get paid, man. He's the most reliable receiver on this football team. And everybody else got paid, whether it was McCaffrey, whether it was Debo, whether it was Kittle, even Nick Bosa, who had a down year. And I would argue that Aiyuk was more impactful than Nick Bosa was last season. I mean, it's the news that keeps on giving, man. So I don't know what's going to happen here moving forward. I don't see the Niners trading no Craig, but who knows? Who the heck knows in this wacky league?
It's a wild, wild league, and there's so much to unpack with what you just said, and obviously you've been unpacking it for hours on end, so we really appreciate you giving us some time here. I will return the favor with, we actually recorded a Take Command, our Commanders podcast episode. It's the one I do, and Logan Paulson, who you know from his time out there and knows Kyle real well. We talked about this, and he had some stuff to say that I'll have to send you because I'm sure it'll be fodder for you guys tomorrow as we were breaking it down. But let me just start with the basics before we kind of get into some of the stuff that Logan and I talked about that I want to bounce off of you. What changed today? Because officially requested a trade versus whatever the heck he has been doing unofficial, being a pain in the butt to try to get traded unofficially, if you will. I say that endearingly, but what actually, in the way you see it, happened today, and did it change any of the facts on the ground for any of the parties involved?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I can't wait to hear that sound from you guys, you and Logan. Look, I've heard so many things, and mostly from the Aiyuk camp, and Brandon Aiyuk himself, and even heard from TJ Houshmandzadeh, former wide receiver with the Bengals, you guys know, of course, on those great Bengals teams, and he's worked out Brandon Aiyuk and knows him really, really well. Apparently, all right, if we just go back to a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, the Aiyuk camp approached the 49ers and say, all right, let's get this deal done. And the 49ers were like, okay, maybe let's talk. And then the Niners were maybe, you know what, let's just wait. We do business in the summer. Let's get through our draft or whatnot. Then we'll come back to you. And then the receiver market just exploded. And so it's Fat Joe always says, a famous rapper from New York City, yesterday's price isn't today's price. And so Brandon Aiyuk said, you know what, like the stock market, my stock has gone up because all these other guys like Nico Collins, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle, they all have gotten paid. So then Aiyuk, about a month ago, if I want to say, finally came back and met with the 49ers. And apparently things are going to be kumbaya. They sat down and met. They all agreed that they still want to remain partners. Aiyuk still wants to play with the 49ers. And this is after the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark. So whatever's happened since then, maybe the 49ers have taken a stance saying we're not going above a certain number. And from what I hear, that number could be $26 million a year, could be $25 a year. But Brandon Aiyuk's probably looking at Debo's contract. Debo's very impactful. Now everybody's going crazy over the receiver documentary on Netflix, but Debo's making $28.6 million this year. Brandon Aiyuk's in line to make $14 million guaranteed. Now it's not tough change in our world. You know, we're scrambling for pennies and nickels and dimes in our world, right? But in their world, Aiyuk probably believes Debo's now $14 million better than me. I made second team All-Pro. I was seventh in the league in receiving yards. I want to get paid. You paid everybody else, and now we're here. So I think it's a last-ditch effort for Brandon Aiyuk to try to get a contract done before training camp. Or now he's like, look, you don't want to pay me, just trade me now so I could join a new team for the start of their training camp.
So how much of this is about the timing, Bonte? Because if you look at the 49ers cap table, which I've tried to do over the last day here or the last couple of hours here in prepping for talking about all this, like there are some guys that come off the books or could come off the books, including, by the way, Deebo Samuel after this season, where you could create some more cap space, and perhaps after the season where they can see how Deebo plays, how Aiyuk plays, how these guys play for one more year, it seems perfectly feasible to then pay Brandon Aiyuk. How much of this for the Niners is not potentially we don't want to pay you, but we don't want to pay you right now?
I think it's the latter right there, what you said. We don't want to pay you right now. And then they're also thinking about Brock Purdy next season and what Brock Purdy could possibly command. Where you look at Joe Burrow making $55 million a season, I don't think Brock Purdy is on Joe Burrow's level. I do believe Brock Purdy's a top 10 quarterback. However, if you took a weapon like Brandon Aiyuk away from him, how good is Brock Purdy? I think there's some facts to that. But it is, hey, we have Tarvarius Ward, we have Deommodore Lenoir, Talanoa Hufanga. What is going to happen with Trent Williams? Do we want to extend George Kittle, who's 31 years old? Deebo Samuel, who didn't finish 2 of the 3 playoff games for the 49ers this past postseason. Can you count on him to play 17 games plus the playoffs? So it's a lot of that baked into it. But also they may just look at Brandon Aiyuk and say, well, we can find another Brandon Aiyuk somewhere else. And I would argue that you probably can't, because you tried it with Dante Pettis. You tried Kendrick Bourne. You tried Jalen Hurd. You tried all these wide receivers, Trent Taylor, Richie James Jr., and it hasn't worked out. He's your first back-to-back 1,000-yard wide receiver since Anquan Bolden, and before that, it was T.O. I mean, we haven't had a great tradition at wide receiver outside of T.O. and Jerry Rice in a number of years. Crabtree gave us a season. Bolden gave us a couple seasons. That's about it outside of the Deebo Samuel 2021 season, in which he really made his impact as a running back more so as a wide receiver. So I think Shanahan and company are maybe being stubborn, and they probably don't like the way Aiyuk is taking things publicly, Instagram, social media, the podcast or whatnot. But mind you, Deebo Samuel did the same damn thing in 2021 before when he wanted his new money, where he's in a club, throat slashes, saying, yeah, I'm done with the Niners, and actually talked to the New York Jets about a trade. So, it's not just Aiyuk either. Like, we got to remember, Deebo has actually addressed the media and said, look, my agent called me, and I knew my name was in trade rumors, and the 49ers were receiving calls on not only Brandon Aiyuk, but also Deebo Samuel, because of what the cap may look like for the 49ers next season. So it's a lot on our mind, the future of the 49ers and how to build this team around Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey.
Well, that's kind of the thing, Bonte, right? Is like, if I'm John Lynch and I can just hold steady this year, I would rather have another year of information. Like, I get it's the NFL. Like, if you can get a new deal and get more money now and a signing bonus for Aiyuk, like, of course you want more money now. Get it in my bank account, please. There's no guarantees. But if I'm Lynch, I'm like, you're under contract, buddy, and we're trying to win a Super Bowl, and next year, like, we're going to have another year's worth of information on all of those gooses. Because, like, if Trent retires, the cap situation looks completely different. So there's all those factors. So I'm curious, as you took calls on your show today, where the fan base came down on all of this.
I would say 65-35, they're pro-Lynch, Shanahan, and not giving Aiyuk this extension right now. And they weren't necessarily saying trade him, but they were basically saying, like, he's the 3rd or 4th or 5th most impactful player on offense. Now, I was taking a position, and I truly believe this, Aiyuk is the best downfield threat for this football team. He's the one guy who can get separation. I think at times he gets underutilized in this offense. I'm a big Deebo fan, but I watched the Super Bowl, and I was there in the Super Bowl where he couldn't gain separation, and he couldn't get off a press jam. Now, do defenses fear Deebo a little more than Aiyuk? Probably, because of the way he can move with the football in his hands. He's just a playmaker where you get the ball in his hands, it can make things happen. But if you are Lynch and you're taking his position, it's like, hey, look, we do reward our players, but we need another year. Our books are not in order. Now, again, I get it from Lynch, and I get it from Shanahan, I get it from the 49ers. But I also understand Brandon Aiyuk wanting the money now, because we just watched this receiver, Doc. We watch Hard Knocks. We watch the NFL every single Sunday. You could get hurt in training camp. You could tear an ACL in training camp. You could tear your Achilles in the practice. You could do it in the game. And then what happens to your value? then what type of money are you getting? Are you going to be working on 1-year contracts? Or are you going to be working on a long-term deal where you get the money, all the guaranteed money like these other receivers did this past offseason? So I do understand both angles of it, but the fans are pro 49ers. They're saying, are you getting camp or else? And look, if it wasn't for the receiver doc, I think fans will still be in on Debo for the way he acted. Fans are kind of out on Nick Bosa for the way he held out in training camp and then used all the excuses in the world all throughout the season saying, well, I didn't have a training camp and I'm a little sluggish and this. And that's like, wait a minute. We don't want to hear it. You stuck the Niners for the richest defensive deal in NFL history. So the fans are definitely, I would say 65% of them from the calls I took today are out on Brandon Aiyuk and saying, dude, just play ball or we can find another Brandon Aiyuk.
Bonte Hill, 95.7 The Game with us here on the Hoffman Show. So to that end, here's kind of the preview version of what Logan and I talked about from the schematics and from a guy in Logan who played for Kyle and knows that offense really well. And actually, I'm the one who brought this up, Bonte, because of the receiver doc that you've mentioned now, the Netflix show for those that haven't seen it. And there's this phenomenal, like, kind of clarifying quote from Kyle in there after Debo goes out one of the times he missed last season. And Kyle goes, well, when he's out, it's not like we run the same plays with our backup Debo. And that, to me, speaks to why Samuel is so valuable, why McCaffrey is so valuable, why Kittle and Juszczyk are so valuable. And I think when you look at Aiyuk, he's exceptional at what he does, but what he does is more replicable. And the other name that we haven't mentioned yet that if I'm Lynch, I'm like, I'm not going to say this out loud, but I want to see is Ricky Pearsall. Super technical route runner, first-round pick out of Florida, that if he all of a sudden looks like he can do what we need to with those other guys around, well, then I don't want to pay Brandon Aiyuk because I can get most of the production. How do you kind of make sense of that as someone who watches this team with a much closer eye week in, week out, of kind of those specialists? The Kittle is super unique to his position. Juszczyk, fullback who can play tight end, Debo, McCaffrey, and then Aiyuk, who's just a receiver.
Oh, I agree with you 100% on that assessment because something I've argued with the fans about. It's funny that now people are coming back at me on my show saying, well, Debo's too valuable for the team. And I remember going into the Jacksonville game when the Niners were on a 3-game losing streak. And people were crying like, Debo, we should flip him. He's just another running back. He's redundant to what McCaffrey does. And I said, folks, the defense reacts differently when McCaffrey and Debo's on the field. Why would you want to get rid of a playmaker like that? Why don't you add to that? Add to Debo, add to McCaffrey, add to Kittle. And that's where Brandon Aiyuk comes in, and he does benefit off of them. However, when it comes to the vertical passing game, when you need to make a play, third down, some of these key third downs late in the game, whether it's the Green Bay playoff game last season, whether it's the miracle catch against the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game, whether it's the divisional round game against the Cowboys 2 seasons ago on third down where Aiyuk's coming up with big plays, Brock Purdy loves himself some Brandon Aiyuk. The guy's a second-team All-Pro. For crying out loud. Now, I'm not talking Pro Bowl. I'm talking about second-team All-Pro where we have all these legit wide receivers. However, Shanahan acknowledging that, hey, half our game plan is with Debo. But, at times I see a game plan with Brandon Aiyuk, like Pittsburgh in Week 1 last season, where Brandon Aiyuk gets 8 targets and catches all 8 of the targets. And another aspect is, the Niners are 32nd in league in passing the ball, right, in terms of, pass attempts. They're a run-first team. They want to play a physical brand of football. They want to run the ball down your throat. They want to get the 30 carries. They want to do all that. But guess what? Brandon Aiyuk in this offense, he gets down and dirty. And I think people overlook it because it's not sexy, which is why we never talk offensive line on sports radio, right? Brandon Aiyuk gets down and dirty.
I don't know what you guys are doing out there. We talk about it all the time here, Bonte. I mean, don't you dare disrespect this dork of a show over here.
I love me some offensive line talk. So when you look at all those big Christian McCaffrey runs last year, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it's Arizona, first play of the game, or Seattle, Brandon Aiyuk is blocking his ass off down the field, a la Jerry Rice, a la John Taylor. I'm not calling them those players, but that's what they did with those great 49er teams back in the day. And that's what Brandon Aiyuk does. He's a complete wide receiver. Is it flashy? No, but he's super consistent. So to your point about, hey, we got to build a game plan around Debo, that's all fine and dandy. But you also know that you can't count on Debo to play every single game and every single snap. Again, he gets hurt because of the way he plays. Kittle gets hurt because of the way he plays. Hell, Kittle wasn't even available for the possession in overtime for the 49ers against Kansas City because he was hurt. Debo was taking a knee. He didn't finish 2 of the last 3 playoff games. Brandon Aiyuk has been durable. He has been consistent. And moving forward, I think And then comes to Brock Purdy. How do you surround Brock Purdy? Okay, you have the left tackle Trent Williams, probably on his last legs. You still have Christian McCaffrey, but we know running backs get hurt. And there is concern about all the touches he had last season. How does that hinder his performance this year? Will you give him a blow? Will you kind of lessen the load for Christian McCaffrey? But moving forward in the passing game, I got to roll with Aiyuk for Brock Purdy and that report that they have over Deebo Samuel.
Bonte Hill, 95.7 The Game. Bonte, if people want to hear any of the local coverage today, because you guys mixed all your shows around, how'd you guys handle the podcast? What should people search in the Odyssey app if they want to podcast on your show today?
You could go Odyssey app. You could go YouTube at 95.7 The Game /Morning Roast. We'll be right there on my big, ugly face along with Joe Shasky. We basically talked 4 hours. But let me ask you this before we get off the air, Craig. Does Washington fans, do Commander fans want Brandon Aiyuk? Because something today that I was throwing out was like, what if the Commanders and Niners came to an agreement and just swapped Terry McLaurin for Brandon Aiyuk? Is that a thing out there? I have no idea, but is that a thing?
That's a fascinating question, like player for player straight up. I am hesitant on doing that, but I'm such a sucker for Terry as a dude. Like he's just A+, and I think with what they're trying to build from a character standpoint and the captain and all that, to like take a guy who represents everything you want as you're trying to establish a new culture and trade him, probably not ideal, even if Aiyuk represents a lot of that same stuff, and AP knows him obviously very well. I think generally speaking, the fan base is kind of split. Giving up draft capital at this point in the rebuild, tough sell. Paying a guy $30 million, I think is a bit of a tough sell when you're already paying Terry. But there's also people that are like, hey, this is Jaden's best friend. Jaden's on a rookie contract. You got the cap space to do whatever you want because they got more cap space than anyone else in the whole league, I'm pretty sure still. So, I don't know. To be honest, Monte, I'm torn. So, I represent the fan base here. Just most of them are calling very vehemently on one side or the other, and I'm stuck somewhere in the middle.
Sounds like me.
Yeah,
Sounds like a sports talk radio host.
Right. People think we have the strong takes. No, we just sit on the receiving end of the strongest ones of all. Bonte Hill. So YouTube.com or 95.7 The Game, The Morning Roast on YouTube. Search that in the Odyssey app as well, and you can catch Bonte's show from earlier today. Bonte, always appreciate it, sir. And we'll see what next Bay Area Commanders / Washington, D.C. adjacent news breaks next.
Just don't ask me about Jordan Poole no more. I apologize to everybody out there.
Yep, we did. We've been got it covered. All set. Yep. All right.
And please send me that podcast with you and Logan, man. I can't wait to hear it because we'll be playing that tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure you get a link as soon as it gets up. It's Bonte Hill, everybody. Appreciate you, sir. That's Bonte with us here on the Hoffman Show. Quick break. We'll come back. Anthony and I have some fun to discuss from earlier today. It's something that's not actually that great for Anthony. And then coming up at 6 o'clock, our first positional group previews. We're just 8 days from training camp. All right, we'll get to the fun in a little bit. We actually have an even shorter segment than I thought here, so I don't want to shortchange the curse of Anthony Haney because it just cannot possibly be shortchanged. So we'll get to that coming up at 6:30. Coming up 6 o'clock, our first positional group preview. We're going to dive all the way into the Commanders' defensive line, talk about everybody, talk about the coaching staff, talk about everything we can possibly think of, all the relevant players, and then give a roster prediction. Coming up in just a little bit. But, Anthony, just to follow up on the thing with the Aiyuk conversation we just had with Bonte, like, I don't know that I fully appreciated, like, I knew he was awesome last year. I forgot that he was named second team All-Pro, which it's funny because if you're watching receiver, which we've now mentioned 1,000 times, they focused on Amon-Ra St. Brown not making the Pro Bowl, but being named first team All-Pro. And it's like he got really pissed not being named to the Pro Bowl because, of course, he did. He had a 1,500-yard season with 10 touchdowns. He belonged in the freaking Pro Bowl. And yet he didn't make it. But the writers who cover the sport for a living were like, yeah, that dude's sick. And he was one of 3 first team All-Pro receivers. So ultimately what it's telling you is the people that cover this year in, year out said last year Brandon Aiyuk was one of the 6 best receivers in football. And if that's the case, then he's worth being paid like a top 10 guy. I just think the thing that makes it so hard that I really struggle with is what really, like, is he that good of a route runner, a technician, and a speed guy and all that stuff, and size and the strength, that is that like a matter of circumstance where because defenses were focused on other stuff, he got a ton of production. But like if I were to start over drafting receivers, is he actually one of the top 10 guys? Or is he that productive and that good last year because he's actually that good at football, in which case the Commanders should absolutely trade for him?
I'm not going to lie, Craig. I think he is worth it. And to be honest, I don't think he gets a lot of the recognition simply because McCaffrey gets a lot of it, Debo gets a lot of it as the gadget guy. But this guy actually runs real routes. Like, he had Jalen Ramsey looking crazy a couple of times. He had a lot of the league's best corners looking crazy. And the thing is, he doesn't even get as nearly as many targets as the CeeDee Lambs, the Justin Jeffersons of the world. He got 105 targets last year, had 75 catches, and was still top 10 in the league, which is insane. 75 for 1,300, that is really impressive. So I think all the questions you're asking about, like, is he really that? I think he is. I just don't think he gets the acknowledgement and the recognition just because of, you got McCaffrey, who's also had 1,500 yards on the ground and 500, 600 yards through the air.
Well, there's also not the measurables that suggest he's that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't say that the measurables are everything, but like he's not 6'4", he's 6 foot. He's not 4.3 fast. He ran a 4.5 at the combine. He's got a 40-inch vertical. That's big time. He's super explosive. He's got a 10.8 broad jump. Looking back at his combine numbers in 2020. Which is a good number, and that speaks to some explosiveness. But it's not like he graded out as like this insane twitched up athlete where you're like, okay, Tyreek Hill's 5 foot whatever he is, or 6 foot even, but he's the fastest guy in the NFL, so we understand why he's producing at that level. He's not this incredible technician as a route runner. Like, yeah, he's really good at it, but he's not Devontae Adams, right? Devontae, you look at and you're like, oh, I get it. I know why that dude's Devontae Adams, because his releases, his route running precision, all that stuff is so elite that it makes sense. And I think that's the thing that I struggle with Aiyuk is that he produced at an otherworldly level. He showed he's got greatness in him. But when he becomes the featured guy and it's not off of the McCaffrey, the Debo, the Kittle, the Juszczyk, the Kyle Shanahan play design, all that kind of stuff that we know makes everybody better. It's not his fault he plays in that offense, but that you have to, as a GM, this is why I trust Adam Peters. This is why I'm happy Adam Peters is the guy doing this, because he knows Aiyuk best, is would he be that here? And that's what I I truly am at the limits of my knowledge, and I'm not going to pretend to have watched Brandon. Maybe that's what I'll do some tomorrow, although my calendar looks like somebody spilled a box of Fruity Pebbles on it tomorrow with all the different appointments and stuff I got. But I'll try to spend some time watching some Aiyuk tape tomorrow, like some All-22 stuff, because I want to have a better understanding of who he is before making some kind of hard opinion. But that's that's what I know the question is. What the answer is, I don't know at this time. But I'm gonna do my homework because that's the kind of guy I am. When we get back, we're helping you do your homework on the Commanders ahead of the 2024 season. Our positional group previews begin. Pick 6 at 6 style. We pick 6 key questions to help preview every position group. We get to it. Defensive line gets us started next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming on YouTube too at the Team 980. So many ways to get the show. If you miss any part of it, definitely worth checking out on demand. Just search the Hoffman Show in your favorite podcast app. And it's right there. That's how it works. And you get to listen to it on your time, on demand, etc., etc. Okay, so here's what we got at 6 o'clock every day for the next 9 days. We will have a position group preview. So we've split up the team, as in the Commanders. You've heard of them.
We are the Commanders.
That's right, Doug. We split them up into 9 position groups. So we got quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, O-line. So 5 offense, 3 on defense. We're just going to do the 3 levels. We could, if we really wanted to start this like last week and try to stretch this out and bore you all to death, we could have done like D tackles, D ends, and tried to get real specific. But I think there'll be plenty to talk about. D-line, linebackers, defensive backs. Maybe we'll split corner and safety. But then we have the specialists as well, and we don't want to forget them because why would we want Tress Way mad at us? And the biggest question we, of course, want to know on the specialists is what number will Tress Way wear? No. So we have 6 then key questions that we're going to ask for every position group. 1, who are the dudes? So who are the literal human beings that are eligible to play that position for the Commanders from the top of the depth chart all the way down to the bottom? 2, who is the coaching staff? Who are the main coaches that are going to affect that group, from their position coach to the coordinator and their histories with that? So like today we're going to do D-line, which also means we're going to probably talk about DQ and his history as a D-line coach a little bit because we know he's going to have some impact there, as well as Daryl Tapp, who we talked to on the show back in the spring. Best player, who's that? Who's the biggest wild card? And then key question that I actually don't know yet. Anthony's going to come up with that every single day. He's just going to pop it on me, kind of a pop quiz question. And then ultimately, who makes the roster at that position? So that is how we're going to do this. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 questions. It's 6 o'clock. And that means
the 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is time!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
All right, let's do it. It's time for the Pick 6 at 6. Position group previews, defensive line.
Number 1.
Who are the dudes? All right, who is actually in consideration? Nice refresher. It's July. We haven't talked about this team in a month. We haven't seen them play since last January. There's been a million things. Some of y'all don't really pay as much attention in the offseason, which is perfectly fine, but it's the time of year that you start to tune back in because it's about football season. So let's get you refreshed on who is in the defensive line room for the Commanders. Of course, not all these guys will make the roster. We'll get there. On defensive end, you have Dante Fowler, Cleveland Ferrell, KJ Henry, F.A. Obata, Dorrance Armstrong, Andre Jones Jr., the 7th-round pick out of Notre Dame, Javonte John Baptiste, and Jalen Harris, amongst others. Interior, Daron Payne, John Allen, Johnny Newton, the 2nd-round pick, Fedarian Mathis, John Ridgway, Benning Patoe is still around. There's a couple other guys that are UDFAs, etc. That, sorry, if you start to make a name for yourself in camp, I'm happy to bring you up, but chances are that you're probably not going to make the roster. I've already named more guys than I think are going to make the roster, so that's probably worth pointing out. Anthony, anybody else that I am forgetting? I'm looking at ESPN's depth chart. Any UDFAs, any fridge roster guys that you think are worth mentioning here that I did not?
No, I think you got them all.
All right, I'm now pulling up the Commanders roster just to make sure that I didn't forget anybody in particular. I would hate to do that. Like a guy like Jalen Harris, interesting prospect, potential. I mentioned him as a potential, practice squad guy. Narell Pollard, defense tackle. You want to know what? Everybody gets a shout out. So that's pretty much everybody. Haggai Nubiusi, I believe he is the international pathway player. So there we go. That's everybody. Okay, so that's number 1. Those are the dudes.
Number 2.
The coaches. So the defensive line coach is Daryl Tapp, who we talked about, we talked to in the OTA period. He was really great. really enthusiastic about getting in, working for DQ. He's worked for him as an assistant D-line coach. And he's got a long history with him as a player. And I thought it was really interesting because Daryl talked about how DQ is the same type of guy. Obviously, he's evolved in his thinking and some schematic stuff over the years. But the word that kept coming up is they do stuff with intention. And I think you see that with some of the drills that they run in the spring. Tap understands how to get the best out of guys. He understands what it's like to be a player, and so he's got that communication. But they also find ways to compete in drills and do things that set guys up for success to get the best training possible and then ultimately the best results. I think the other thing that's pretty fascinating about the history here, we think about DQ in Seattle. We think about some of what they did in Dallas. We think about, Tap being a part of that Seattle line as a player. Those spots in DQ's career, he relied on a big, heavy rotation of guys. They had just 8 dudes in Seattle who they would rotate through, and they really knew how to keep guys fresh and realize the value of that. Yet they always seem to have their studs on the field in the biggest possible situations. I hate when I look down and it's a key third down and your number one receiver is taking a blow on the sideline. Or your number one rush guy is taking a blow because you played him on first and second. Like, get him out of the game and get him the blow on second down so he's ready to go for third down. Like, there's certain game management stuff that you have to be good, or managing them better throughout the game so that when you get to the fourth quarter, they're still fresh and they can play more downs. And I think that's something to watch this year, especially considering John Allen and Daron Payne played so many freaking snaps last year, and they weren't able to be their best. So the rotation and kind of how Tap manages this line is huge. The other big trademark of a DQ defense the last bunch of years in Dallas has been the ability to create matchups. He's done it for Micah Parsons, and he'll line him up anywhere. And I think when you look at this group, Payne is the guy that seems most likely to move around to create matchups because he can play inside, he can play outside, he can play as a nose tackle, play as a 3-tech, play as a 1-tech. Like, he's fast enough to play on the edge if you have a weak tackle or you want to throw a different body type. And they have guys like Dorrance Armstrong, like Cleveland Ferrell, that are big enough bodies on the edge that they can play inside off of Payne. And so how they manage that, I think, is really interesting. Other names to know, Sharif Floyd as the assistant D-line coach. He played for DQ in a bunch of different spots, so he's come along as the assistant. Ryan Kerrigan is the assistant linebackers pass rush specialist, so Ryan is still around, and hopefully he can help some of these edge guys like KJ Henry come along. Those are the main pieces on the defensive line that you need to know about headed into training camp.
Number 3.
All right, our pick 6 at 6, positional preview style, defensive line. Our third question is, who is the best player on this unit? And Anthony, I'm going to bring you in here because I think this is actually an interesting question. I'm going to let you answer first. Who's the best player on the defensive line? I think it's down to 2 names, but which one do you pick?
Are we going who's the more talented one, or who's the better
the best
overall
player on the defensive line? It's not like there's a prize for being right or wrong here, which I think is important to point out.
I would say I think Daron Payne is the best player on the defensive line. Like, when he's on, like when he's motivated and playing well, I think he's the best of the group.
I tend to agree with you. John Allen's like, they're different. Daron's peak is higher. There's been no greater 3-play sequence by a defensive tackle than that 3 plays against Denver. Aaron Donald certainly had plenty of them, and maybe in some bigger games where he just completely wrecked drives. But that was insane when he just completely wrecked an entire drive by himself last year. And he can do that kind of stuff. Like, his pass rush skill is very, very high. His hands are great. His feet are way too quick for someone his size. But there's little stuff that John does on a consistency basis, down in, down out, that I think a lot of D-line coaches would rather have Allen than Payne. I think the question is, what level are you going to get to on the high end for John Allen? Is he a guy that's just consistently solid to good and then maybe some weeks bad? Or is he sometimes great? Because 2 years ago, John Allen was great. 3 years ago, John Allen was great. Great. To the point that both these guys in ESPN's defensive tackle rankings are still receiving votes. They're no longer in the top 10, either of them. in the survey that Jeremy Fowler did league-wide that we talked about yesterday, coaches, execs, etc. But if John Allen's pass rush and that hump move is still elite, and last year was just a year that was plagued by the foot injury that he was never right, then John Allen has the potential to be the best player in this room. If not, then it's probably going to be Deron Payne, and the area for Payne to solidify that is just the consistency, the little things, how he takes on double teams, stuff that John's just exceptional at. And I'm also curious, schematically, what do they ask these guys to do? How do they move them around? All that kind of stuff. But I think it's Payne, barely over Allen. But honestly, I think it's a great, I'm more confident in Payne's level at this point because of what happened with Allen and the injury and age and everything, with where he's at in his career. I would love for the answer to be a clear John Allen by the end of this year, because I think that means you got 2 Pro Bowl level performances out of Allen and Payne by the end of it.
Nah, I agree.
All right.
Number 4.
Number 4, who's the wild card player in this room? The guy that could change the dynamic of it. And I have one for sure in mind, but I'm curious if you pick another name.
And the whole group.
Yeah.
I would say, because I feel like Dorrance is going to, part of the question I was going to ask, do we know the starters? I mean, we know we got John, we know we got
I would think that Furl and Armstrong are going to start, with Fowler being the next guy in the rotation as more of a pass rush, pass down, and then KJ Henry behind him.
Yeah, so I would say my wild card would probably be, I think we're going to have the same wild card, to be honest.
All right, 1, 2, 3, Newton. Yeah. I think Johnny Newton is a guy that some people had as a top 15 player in this draft, and he's a wild card for a couple reasons, right? Like John Allen, Deron Payne, contractually, you're not obligated to them for that much longer, and that's part of the reason you draft Newton is these guys eventually are going to age out, and you want the next guy up, and he was by far the best player on the board at that point. I think they had a full tier upgrade on him. They couldn't believe that he was still there. So he's got a chance to be a star immediately. And we talk about those two dudes taking on way too many snaps. If he can come in and the level of play basically doesn't drop because he's that good from day one, oh my God, they've got a chance. And that also opens up some interesting opportunities. Do you play some 3-4 kind of looks? And did we not maybe then mention enough names? Because then Frankie Louvu and Jamin Davis as stand-up edge pass rushers become a little bit more interesting. Fowler's played with his hand not in the ground before. Armstrong, those guys, they're mobile enough that they can play standing up on the edge. And so in certain situations, do you create some different looks and get all 3 of them on the field at the same time? There's a lot of possibilities here. I don't want to get the cart too far before the horse, but that's kind of the point here is the wild card player is someone who could change the landscape of the room. And if you wind up with a 3-headed monster inside and the ability to move some of those guys outside potentially in certain situations, I think you could be really, really tough up front. And I think Newton's the guy that holds the key to that potentially happening, because there's a really good chance that he's the 3rd best guy in the room behind 2 guys that have been Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Phil Mathis. I was thinking about, John Ridgeway, possibly filling that void. But I feel as though they had their chance, sort of, kind of. And, we know what their ceiling is to an extent. Jerzon Newton, he was a first-round grade, super talented, ended up falling. So I think, if he actually does live up to what he was graded out to be, I think he could really, turn some heads and, shake up that room.
Yeah, I think the other fear, though, of course, is he's missed everything so far with injuries. What if he just doesn't play at all this year? So you talk about a wild card. Man, that's a big, big wild card. All right, do we want to say who makes the roster is question 5, or do you want to do your key question?
Let's do my key question real quick.
All right.
Number 5.
Fire away.
Number 5. So we're talking about the defensive line, but does a defensive lineman actually lead the team in sacks? We just mentioned, Jamin Davis. We just mentioned Frankie Louvu. We know how Joe Witt and Dan Quinn, they like to, mix up their blitzes and things of that nature. Does a D lineman actually lead our team in sacks this season?
Wow, that is a great question. Yes. I think Allen or Payne does. I think those
defensive tackle too. Okay.
Well, if you, I'll put it this way. You give me Allen, Payne, and Armstrong versus the field, I feel pretty good.
Okay.
I'm scared that Luvu is going to be the guy. But, and there's a chance like he turns into a 12, 13 sack guy because they use him in that role way more, and then that's kind of a game changer, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that he's going to have that many opportunities, and I just looked it up. His career high is 7. So is he going to go from a guy who played like as a true off-ball linebacker and a great blitzer and picked up 7 sacks to a guy that's playing a little bit more edge and gets 12? I don't know. Allen and Payne have both had double-digit sack seasons, I believe. I know Payne has. Allen, I'm pretty sure, has 2. Armstrong had 8.5 last year as a rotational guy. Like, I think he's a little underrated potentially, but also how much of that was coming off the fact that teams were worried about Tank Lawrence and Micah Parsons. So, man, that's tough. I think Luvu is a huge, huge threat to that. I think, obviously, it would be sick if Jamin turns into some monster Micah Parsons impersonator, but I just am not holding my breath on that. Like, Parsons is so special, and just because Jamin's big and has long arms and is fast doesn't mean he's going to all of a sudden be Micah Parsons because Dan Quinn showed up and, like, patted him on the helmet 4 times. So, yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to say yes, but I don't feel amazing about it. All right, number 6.
Number 6.
Final question. We'll do this for every position group. Who makes the roster? I'm going to go 10 spots, Ant. I'm going to say Payne, Allen, Newton, Ridgeway, Mathis. There's 5 on the interior. Armstrong, Fowler, Furl, Henry. Oh, my God. That gets so hard. The other contenders are Andre Jones Jr., last year's 7th rounder, Javonte John Baptiste, this year's 7th rounder, and F.A. Obata. And F.A., they brought back, for 1. 2, he can play inside-outside, which gives him a leg up because if you want to be able to move some of these guys around, F.A., as a pass rusher from the interior, could have some juice. I think it depends on what kind of camp he has. I think there's also a chance that Mathis and Ridgeway are fighting for 1 spot, and then that 2 of these guys make it. I'm going to say my July 16th, whatever it's worth prediction, is that John Baptiste is the 10th guy, and Obata and Jones are on. Jones, they try to sneak to the practice squad and probably get him there. And I don't know what happens with Obata, but that's my prediction.
Ooh, I love your picks. And I think it's going to be F.A. and Ridgeway battling for that last. F.A., Ridgeway, Phil Mathis.
So they could go 6-4.
Yeah, I think that's what it could be.
I think that's definitely possible.
I think Javonte John Baptiste, I definitely think he makes the roster.
Here's the other wild card. Can they start Newton on PUP? Right? Is he open camp? I think they don't want to. But if they can start him on PUP and save a roster spot that way potentially, and then maybe like in week 3 he's ready, and then or I guess it's week 4 I think you have to wait. Whenever that is, they change the rules every year, and I used to know them.
I think it's like 3 weeks out, and then you play week 4.
But then like, can you cut Javonte John Baptiste in week 5, and it's easier to get him to practice squad then than if he got caught up in all the cuts around the league. So that's the key question. That's going to be tough. All right, so that's our pick 6. That's our defensive line positional group preview. Do we want to stick with defense tomorrow, Anthony, or do you want to switch it over to the offensive side tomorrow?
I think we go offense.
All right, so maybe O-line tomorrow?
All
right, O-line tomorrow. Nothing to talk about there. That'll be 6 o'clock tomorrow, and then don't forget we're counting down our 10 most important commanders of the season every day at 4:30. Today, number 9 was Emmanuel Forbes, followed Dorrance Armstrong yesterday at number 10, reveal number 8 at 4:30 tomorrow. When we get back, what a day it has been, and still got lots more to come in terms of live sports in D.C. today. The curse of Anthony Haney, it lived on. We got to talk about it next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming on YouTube at the Team 980. Heck of a show today. Actually, let me check this real quick. I just got the starting 11 for tonight's match at Audi Field. We talked about this with Sam Mewis, the World Cup champion, earlier in the show, 5 o'clock. If you missed it, it's also on YouTube at youtube.com/HoffmanWSports. For the U.S. tonight, Alyssa Nair, Emily Fox, Naomi Girma, Trinity Rodman, Crystal Dunn, Mallory Swanson, Lindsey Horan, Sophia Smith, Tiana Davidson, Rose Lavelle, and Sam Coffey. So, Trinity Rodman, of course, Spirit star in the starting 11. Casey Kruger, Hal Hirschfeld, and Croy Bethune are available off the bench. Bethune made her debut last time out over the weekend. I definitely would assume that there's some pretty heavy squad rotation tonight, but I think it's interesting that it's basically the same lineup that they played over the weekend, Anthony, against Mexico. The one change is because Crystal didn't start. Mal's in, Trin's in, Soph's in. Yeah, so they have at outside back, instead of Jenna Neiswanger, they have Crystal Dunn at outside back. So interesting there. The former Spirit player won the MVP here back in 2015. So that's the lineup tonight. Between the heat and the fact that it's a quick turnaround from Saturday to Tuesday, I'd imagine that a lot of those players only play 60 minutes, and they'll use all their subs, etc. You could see the debut of Hal Hirschfeld tonight, the Spirit rookie who is on this team as an alternate but is available in the squad tonight. All right, that's my my nightcap, if you will, of a women's sports doubleheader today, day-night doubleheader, old school style. Anthony, we started with the class field trip. We went to Capital One Arena, where the Mystics took on the Phoenix Mercury. They started this game quite well. And in fact, it was a close game with the Mystics leading well into the second half. They opened up a 2-point lead in the first quarter. They tied the second. And in halftime, things were good. And then the third quarter came, and things went downhill for the home team. Ultimately, Brittany Griner was awesome. 23 points, 7 rebounds. Natasha Cloud, in her return to D.C., had a double-double, 12 points, 10 assists. Kalia Copper hit a bunch of big buckets. She had 22. Copper, Griner, and Diana Taurasi, who also was back, hit a couple of big shots, threes, had the game-sealing block in the end of it, 5 assists. Those three headed to the Olympics for Team USA. Sophie Cunningham hit a couple big shots off the bench. Meanwhile, for the Mystics, just too many turnovers. Maisha Hines-Allen, who played all in all pretty well, 18 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, but 4 turnovers and a couple in some big spots. We could keep rolling off numbers. Ariel Atkins had a nice night, 14 points on 5 of 12 shooting. Needed to hit a couple more threes in some big spots, but overall played well. I could keep going down the list. But, Anthony, the only stat that matters is you remain over, dude.
I know. And I had the realization, walking out of the game, I'm just like, dang, another game Anthony Haney has attended. And another loss is stacked up, for the team that I'm rooting for. Still trying to get to the bottom of it. I thought, when my 28th birthday came around, the curse was over.
New year, new you.
And boy, was I wrong.
So for
I'm
those
off to a bad start.
For the uninitiated, there is an ongoing curse of Anthony Haney that hopefully you've gotten word of by now, because it's come up a lot. Anthony, a couple weeks ago, we brought him to his first Spirit game. They were losing. He left the building. They tied it. So at least they were able to salvage that. We let him come back to the Spirit game. By we, I mean I and also Croy Bethune signed off on Anthony coming back to the game, and they lost. They had their worst performance of the season. And then we started to really deep dive into this, and we realized that it has been well over a year since Anthony attended a sporting event of any kind where the team he was rooting for won, at least on the professional ranks. How's like the high school games you go to?
The high school games is a little bit better.
Okay, so like when you
They're
go
a
to
little
a
bit
game
better.
for prep or wherever else, your middle school that you help out at, all these. How is your flag football? What happens if you participate? How'd y'all do in flag this year?
We have not won we won a tournament last November, so I guess it isn't that bad. But all the other tournaments we lost.
So it seems to be the curse is when you attend a professional sport. You haven't gone back to any Syracuse games, have you?
Nah, I haven't.
Okay, so we don't know if the level cutoff is college or not. Have you been to any college games of any kind that you weren't working? Because you did some college games during the season, but you were a professional. You weren't rooting for anybody.
No, I haven't gone to a Maryland game, a Georgetown game. None of those.
Okay. So at professional level, Wizards, Mystics, Spirit, Commanders, Poopsie Daisies,
Colts.
I
actually have a funny story about the Colts thing. So I sent Zaire the reel, and he was like, you might have to stay away. You really might have to stay away. And then, so I'm supposed to go to the Colts game when they play the Bears, week 3. And he's playing his former coach, Flus.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, he was like, I gotta be Flus. So
you're not invited?
I am invited.
Okay, so you're invited. Wow.
But there's a lot of pressure on that game right now.
Dog, if the Colts lose that game,
oh my
is your
God.
friendship?
I can't go to another one. I can't. Because I'm supposed to go to the last game of the season. I forgot I think it's the Jaguars they play. And this past year.
Could you imagine if you go to the game against the Bears and they lose, and then you go to the last one and they're playing for a playoff spot and they lose?
They just did that this year.
Zaire might actually cut you out of his life.
I think if it gets to that point, if they lose against Chicago, and I'm also supposed to go to the game in Houston. So if they lose to the game in Houston as well, I won't go to the last game. I'll be the odd man out because all of the bridal party, we're supposed to go to the last game of the season. But
where's Ant? He's not allowed to come.
Yeah,
Why not?
I'm not,
Did something
I'm not
happen?
allowed to. Yeah,
not personally. We're still boys, but he is
got
a
some
bad
bad
luck
juju.
charm. That's silly. No, it's been 3 years since he saw his team win.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. Because even the Commanders game with Terry Moss, Stephon Gilmore, I was at that game. I was rooting. I was more so impartial, but I was secretly rooting for the Commanders, but also rooting for Zaire to go out there, have the game of his life, but sort of kind of come up short. And that's sort of kind of what happened.
Okay, so that's the closest you have.
Yeah.
That's the closest you have.
Yeah.
And that was how long ago at this point? That was over 2 years ago?
Yeah, over 2 years ago.
Dog.
It's been a long time.
It's not
Took
good.
my dad and my granddad to a Commanders-Browns game. They got destroyed. Yeah.
All right, so our next chance is to test this. Let's see. August 17th, weekend game. The Mystics play the Lynx. Then maybe, that's a 7 o'clock. Ooh, 8:23 against that's a really that's a potential really good one. Let me look at this on the calendar, make sure that I have the days of the week right here. August 20, yeah. So August 23rd is a Friday night. 7:30 tip against the Sparks for the Mystics.
Okay.
That could be-
8:23. What day of the week is that?
That's a Friday.
Okay, bet.
So that could be a potential field trip because we could get there. We have half hour after the show ends.
Yep.
So maybe we look at that one.
I like the odds in that game.
And then
as
that's
well,
the
though.
thing. It's the Sparks. They're not very good.
Yeah.
So we're trying to
Come on.
look. If we're being honest here,
Fingers crossed.
we can't put this all on Anthony. As much fun as it is, I mean, literally as much fun as it is, because we're talking about the 2023 Commanders who won 4 games, the 2023 Wizards who won 15, and the Mystics who so far are 6-13, I believe, on the 6-19 on the year. So we haven't on the home teams had great odds.
Yeah.
But of the teams that are worse in the W, then the Mystics. Well, the Sparks technically aren't one. They're a half game up, but they're at least in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Help
So,
me, please.
We gotta take advantage of what we can. We gotta break the streak no matter what. All right, circling it. August 23rd. Sorry, everyone's on an Olympic break until then. But we're gonna see what we can do to get a win on the board for Anthony Haney. Until then, the curse lives on. When we get back, the best thing from the show today and real things real people said in real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube. Always at the Team 980 as well. Heck of a show today. You missed any part of it, check the podcast. But we always, at the end of it, well, I say always, as of this week. We're starting it this week, and we're going to stick with it because I think it's a fun thing to do. We look back at the best thing from the show on any given day. And today, our top story was that Brandon Aiyuk has officially requested a trade from the San Francisco 49ers. If you want the full discussion of that, top of the show, 4 p.m., so hour 1 in the podcast. If you want Bonte Hill from 95.7 The Game on at 5:30, so hour 2 of the podcast, halfway through. And those are also available as individual clips in our podcast feed. But best of was Bonte talking about the Brandon Aiyuk situation with us here on the Hoffman Show.
I think Shanahan and company are maybe being stubborn, and they probably don't like the way Aiyuk is taking things publicly, Instagram, social media, the podcast or whatnot. But mind you, Deebo Samuel did the same damn thing in 2021 before when he wanted his new money, where he's in a club, throat slashes saying, yeah, I'm done with the Niners, and actually talked to the New York Jets about a trade. So, it's not just Aiyuk either. Like, we got to remember, Deebo has actually addressed the media and said, look, my agent called me, and I knew my name was in trade rumors, and the 49ers were receiving calls on not only Brandon Aiyuk, but also Deebo Samuel because of what the cap may look like for the 49ers next season. So it's a lot on our mind, the future of the 49ers and how to build this team around Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey.
Great stuff from Bonte. You can search the Morning Roast in the Odyssey app if you want more from Bonte's show, if you want kind of the full, fleshed-out local coverage from the Bay Area. But again, just search the podcast feed for The Hoffman Show, and you can check out my chat with Bonte in full in our podcast feed. Also, we continued our off-season coverage today with our positional previews, the debut of those. So we did the full D-line preview at 6 o'clock, and then back at 4:30, we unveiled number 9 in our countdown of the top 10 commanders of the 2024 season. Number 9 was Emmanuel Forbes. Number 10, Dorrance Armstrong. That all available on all our on-demand platforms, including the Hoffman Show podcast. And our off-season coverage is presented by T-Mobile. Switch to T-Mobile, and you can get tons of benefits and still save on every plan versus AT&T and Verizon. Use their savings calculator to find out how at T-Mobile.com/switch. Any other housekeeping previews for tomorrow, Anthony? What do we got?
Tomorrow is Wednesday.
Tomorrow is Wednesday. Linnell is unavailable to us this week.
I know.
He's big timing us, doing something called his own show. It's fair. Our guy does a lot of talking.
Yeah.
So he's allowed to do his own show.
Is it three shows in 2 days or something like that? He's swamped.
I think. Well, it's All-Star break, so
yeah.
Overtime on the Fan. There's no Nats game, so he's doing overtime.
Yeah.
Does that mean we have a blank rundown tomorrow?
No, because we still have.
4:30 we'll unveil player number 8, who is actually super interesting. I'm very excited. And then 6 o'clock is our positional previews. We said we're gonna do O-line. We can stick with that.
Yep.
Okay, so O-line tomorrow at 6. Player number 8 at 4:30. Outside of that, do we have a blank rundown?
We might get to best case, worst case.
Oh, yeah. We've been kicking around this topic for like a week, and we keep having to push it back. But it's like, what's the best case scenario for the Commanders' new additions? What's the worst case? So that could be pretty fun. We had some good stuff in our Take Command mailbag, so we'll probably play a little bit of that. So plenty of stuff as we head towards training camp. And there's stuff that keeps happening every single day.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing, is like the reason we have some of these things that we're like, we'll get to it in middle of July. It's like, not if news keeps breaking. So who knows who asks for a trade tomorrow. And with that, it's time for Real Things Real People Said into Real Microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, let's see what we got in the Real Things file today. By the way, that interview with Sam Mewis, I asked Sammy, what is the biggest, well, actually the question's in here. So Sam Mewis on the biggest strengths and weaknesses on the U.S. as they prepared to play at Audi Field in half an hour. And, of course, get ready for Paris. So if you look forward to the Olympics, what's the one thing that you are the most confident in with this U.S. side? And what's the one biggest concern where you're like, if they get got, I'm scared that it's going to be like this?
Maybe we're a little bit vulnerable in transition, especially if one of our outside backs is playing really high. A little bit worried, but I definitely think we can fix it. So I'm not that worried about it. I think what I'm most confident in, and this kind of goes against what everybody's been saying about the team not being clinical with their finishing. Mal Swanson, Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith are all in great scoring form. They can create for themselves. They can score off crosses. They can score from outside the box. Like, when you're in great scoring form like that, like, I don't think that that's just going to go away. I think it's going to click. And I think that front three is so dangerous.
So if you look forward to the Olympics. Okay. So that is very interesting from Sam, and she would know better than me because she's scored goals in major tournaments and I have not. But it has been a thing that, specifically for Sophia Smith and Trinity Rodman, their finishing in NWSL has been better than it has for Team USA. Now would be a hell of a time for them to kind of break through and the dam to break. They could, because if they're finishing, the chances and the number of chances they create, oh my God, they could be back to winning games 3-4 goals on the board. Hopefully 0 for the other side. But that's how the U.S. used to do it when the talent disparity was so much bigger and the investment was so much bigger, but that's not how it is anymore. But Costa Rica, good challenge tonight. Not Olympic caliber team necessarily, not one of the best in the world, but a team that is tough enough to give them a test. So headed over to Audi Field, and we'll talk about that tomorrow for sure on the show as well. Other than that, real things style. Last night, ahead of the home run derby, Gunnar Henderson stopped by the ESPN booth to, I can't make this up, do a Scooby-Doo impression.
Gunnar, real quick, give me that Scooby-Doo impression. Yeah, give me.
All right. Raggy.
Perfect.
Game's over.
Game's over.
I'm not going to lie, Anthony. I have a pretty good Scooby-Doo, like similar. My throat's been a little bothering me, and it's also something that I don't necessarily want that living on the internet forever.
He killed it, Craig.
He did a really good job.
The giggle, the
re-hee-hee-hee is the key to it. That's also, if you have it, it's not as hard as you may think. But he did a very, very good job, and applause to Gunnar Henderson. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm raining on his parade.
What
I want to know is maybe after the show.
Okay.
And then if it's good and people remember and request it tomorrow, perhaps on the air.
Everyone tweet
How
Craig.
did Eduardo Perez know that Gunnar Henderson had that in him? That's what I want to know. Think about that. Well, apparently one time, way back when, Jason Tatum asked LeBron James for an autograph. LeBron said no, and this is that story.
Crazy thing is, Bron told me no. I gotta tell him about this story.
What was that time when you asked him for his autograph and he wouldn't give it to you?
I ain't never told him that story. Oh, he ain't tell me no, but he kind of told me no. In Memphis, a long time ago, Larry Hughes is my dad's best friend. They played on the Cavs together. My mom took me to a game in Memphis. I wanted to meet LeBron, and I wanted to get a picture with him and an autograph. And there was a lot of people back there, and he was like, I'm out, I gotta go. And I got in the car and started crying.
And he cried. And that's why Jason Tatum has signed every autograph ever. Also, LeBron, apparently, when he was told that story, looked at Tatum and went, is that why you dunked on me in the Eastern Conference Finals?
And then chest bumped him.
Which is pretty funny. That's our show. We'll see you tomorrow on the Team 980.